Welcome to Chilling with Nikki. In this podcast, I've researched hundreds of historical newspaper articles to bring you some of the most bone-chilling tales to your home. And in today's story, we're going to talk about little Isabelle Bloomer and what happened in the days that she was missing. It all started in the summer of 1890, just outside of Rosalia, Kansas. A farmer by the name of Dudley, along with two of his hired companions, a Mr. Alonzo Edwards and his wife, Miss Martha Edwards. Accompanying the Edwards was Miss Martha's 10-year-old daughter, Mary Atkins. Now, as they were making their way to the Dudley farm, they also met up with another couple, a Mr. and Mrs. Ellis Bloomer. And with them was their 3-year-old daughter, Isabelle Bloomer. Now, it is said when they got to the farm, they all agreed upon that Miss Martha would stay in the home with both the children while the other adults would go out and work the crops for the day. Now, I'm not sure how long that they were out there working the crops. It could have been 10 hours. It could have been 2 hours. But at some point, the Bloomers came in the home to pick up little Isabelle. But to their horror, little Isabelle was not in the house. And when asked Miss Martha where she was, she claimed she saw the small girl follow her parents out to the crops. Of course, that became a cause for concern because the parents had not seen little Isabelle since earlier that day. So the group started searching for the small child, and unfortunately, they did not find her. It was then that they reached out to the local sheriff through a telegram, but they also reached out to the nearby neighbors. Now, back then, in the 1800s, sometimes it would take hours, possibly days, before the local sheriff would actually come to the scene of the crime. But when they reached out to the neighbors, it took only a couple of hours for almost 500 neighbor farmers, men, women, and children, to show up to help search for little Isabelle. So on that first day, that is exactly what was happening. They were out searching, and their search did not retrieve the small child. She was nowhere to be found. Now, in the reports, it was stated that the neighbors, the people out searching for little Isabelle, started getting a little suspicious, especially of Miss Martha. They said she mostly stayed in the home. She didn't come out much to help find the little girl. They also stated that Mr. Edwards was visibly shaken through the whole ordeal. And because of the way and the suspicious behavior that both of them were acting, they started to ask them questions, especially Miss Martha, because she was the last one to see the small child. And at first, Miss Martha stayed with her story that Isabelle followed her parents out to the crops, but they kept pressuring her. In fact, that pressuring became a little threatening. They were threatening to harm her, and they started to threaten to harm her husband if she did not tell them what had happened. So she then gave them a story. And that was that she, in fact, did kill Isabelle, and that she carried Isabelle towards the riverbank, and that's where she laid her body, was next to the creek. Of course, that prompted the searchers to go out and look near the bank of the creek. And unfortunately, again, their search was not successful. So they then went back to Miss Martha and again pressured her some more, and then her story changed. Now, she still claimed that she still killed little Isabelle, but once she placed the body by the creek, her husband, Alonzo, then went and retrieved Isabelle and carried her off on horseback. Now, of course, the mob, I'm going to call them the mob because you've got to think there's 500 people raining down on this one lady trying to, and of course, during that time, they're frantic, just like with any kidnapping or any child missing, you have a short period of time to find them alive before, all your hope is lost. They went back and they spoke to Mr. Edwards. And his story was that he never touched the small child. He did, in fact, see his wife carry her off from the house, but he never went and retrieved her. The neighbors also confronted 10-year-old Mary Atkins, Martha's daughter from her first marriage. And at first, she was very reluctant. They said that she kept telling them she had no idea, she didn't know. But of course, after some pressure, her story changed as well, and she stated that her mom hit her, meaning Isabelle. That, of course, to them was more proof now. Not only did they have a confession by Miss Martha, but they also had a confession by the husband claiming he's seen her, and now the child is stating that her mom hit Isabelle and killed her. All of this was going on in a matter, of 24 hours, where they were finding out that Isabelle was possibly dead by Miss Martha. And the crowd became agitated, more mad, because nobody could tell them where Isabelle was. And unfortunately, that caused the crowd to become violent. And they started to torture this couple. They would take a rope, wrap it around their neck, and partially hang them from a tree until they would literally choke and pass out. They did not kill them, but they just tortured them. They beat them, and they actually did try to burn Mr. Edwards at the stake. He did live through his injuries. When the sheriff finally showed up at the Dudley farm, the crowd of neighbors did not want him to reprimand the couple. They wanted justice, so they didn't want the sheriff to come in and take it. They wanted to bring down justice on this couple. So what they did was they took that rope and they wrapped both Mr. and Mrs. Edwards, and they tied the rope to horseback, and they drugged them for the next 2 days through that county to keep them away from the sheriff. And during that time, they kept torturing them. They beat them, strangled them to almost, to where they would pass out. They tortured them. And that went on for 2, possibly 3 days. There was a mix of, I think the timeline, when you're looking at newspapers from back then, they're very repetitive in some of the things that they talk about, so you have to kind of break it down. My understanding, they were literally 2 days, almost 3. They were dragged around the county and beaten and tortured. At some point, the sheriff was able to retrieve the suspects. The mob and neighbors did allow him to get the suspects and take them to the jail. Now, by that time, 500 people had gathered to almost over 1,000. And of course, they were calling for the execution of the Edwards. But by the grace of God, the mom of little Isabelle begged the sheriff not to kill them because she wanted her daughter in her arms. She wanted proof that her child was in fact dead, that she in fact been killed. Now, miles away, probably about 3 or 4 miles away from the Dudley farm, a farmer had walked outside on his porch. He saw little Isabelle Bloomer on his porch, wearing the same clothes that she wore days earlier when she went missing. She was alive, healthy, probably dehydrated. They did state that she was dirty. It was then that farmer sent a telegram to the sheriff to let him know that little Isabelle had been found alive. Now, they did state that it did take the crowd some time to understand that Mr. and Mrs. Edwards did not commit a crime at all. They did not want to believe that the people that they tortured for the last 3 days was innocent. But it wasn't until they were actually shown proof that little Isabelle had been reunited with her parents that they finally backed down. And Mr. and Mrs. Edwards, they were released. Now I tried to look up some more information on the Bloomers along with the Edwards. I couldn't find much about what happened to little Isabelle after her experience. I can tell you this, that in the paper it stated that she was probably kidnapped. And to be completely honest with you, I don't believe that. Now, it could have came out later on that she was in fact kidnapped. I could not find any more information on it. But I think that there was a very good possibility that she did in fact just wander off. You have to think back then, children were a little bit more resourceful, especially if they were raised on a farm. I mean, that's what their family did. They worked a farm, they worked the land, they know the terrain. So I think it's very possible that she could have lived 3 or 4 days. Now, she did, when they questioned her, she did state that she was in a house with a man. But I'm not sure I believe that, because they pressured a grown woman and a grown man into confessing to a murder they didn't commit. They even pressured a 10-year-old child to confess that her mother hurt Isabelle. So I'm not real sure I can believe the story that she was kidnapped and in a house for a few days without thinking that they possibly pressured this child to state that she was kidnapped. Because let's be honest, they don't want to be called out. The farmers, the crowd of neighbors did wrong in this situation. They jumped to conclusions. They pressured innocent people to commit to a crime that there was no evidence whatsoever that they had done. Now, like I stated earlier, and I'm sorry I kind of got away from there, that I tried to do some research on little Isabelle. I couldn't find anything after her kidnapping or possible kidnapping. Let's just call it, she was a missing child. She probably went missing and was out in the woods by herself for a few days. Now, I also looked up information on the Edwards. I did find about a year after this incident, Mr. and Mrs. Edwards were looking for some sort of restitution for the torture that they had went through. I'm not sure if they won that case, but they were mentally and physically abused. I mean, they were beaten, strangled, set on fire, dragged through the county for a crime they didn't commit. I'm glad that this case, everybody is alive, or they ended up alive at the end of the day. But you just can't help but wonder, how does something like that go horribly wrong? How do you, without having all the facts, how do you torture someone? You know, the sad thing is we still do that to this day. Before we have all the facts on someone, we will drag their name through social media, through the news, without ever having the facts. And then guess what? Lo and behold, it comes out they're innocent. They didn't do anything. And then people are mad. It's like, no, you're mad because you made a big uh-oh. You would think after us being on this earth that we would do better and be better. But we just find other ways to torture people. It's truly sad. Like I said, I'm glad the outcome is that they all lived. They appear to finish out their lives. But I just don't think that we've learned anything as human beings. We can do better, be better. I do hope you enjoyed the story of Isabelle Bloomer. I do have more stories where that came from. The next one that I have coming up, it's a doozy, y'all. I'm telling you, it is crazy. Anyways, I'm just rambling. I hope y'all have a blessed day, and I hope you come back to listen to more Chilling with Nikki. Take care, y'all.